than what is. No, almost no one's ever quite where they want to be in love, you know, or you look in the mirror, it's like, well, my body today, you know, I just don't know about that. You know, it's interesting the way you treat the body and kind of, you know, give attention to, because when you really kind of help illustrate the way in which, for the woman herself, and then also within her social world, once a woman begins to develop, the body becomes a kind of a zone of contention, you know, in some ways. Can you tell us some of the ways that you, you know, kind of thought about that and developed the character of Kenny or Kendra? We're kind of in medias res with our discussion of the sweet in between, just discussing the fact that, you know, Kendra is, what should we say, is, you know, dealing with her, what's the best way to describe, dealing with her body, I guess you could say. I mean, dealing with
you know, and Glow calls her gender confused.
Right, that's right.
And, but your question was about her appearance and how I dealt with that.
Right.
And in a general way, as a fiction writer, I deal with the body only as much as it pertains to characterization and the plot. So in this particular novel, her body is a huge problem for her.
Right.
Because she needs to not be seen as a girl. By not be seen, you know, she's, I don't know, it's a small section, I don't know where it is in the book, but there's a place where she talks about when she's on the bus and there's a boy who's making sexual innuendos at her and making mouth noises, little sex noises kind of thing, and he picks on her. And yet, when she dresses as a boy, he would never do that because that makes him look queer. And see, that's real uncomfortable to me, but that's exactly where I want to be. Because Kenny is using the tropes of her world in a real kind of perverse way to protect herself by making somebody else not want to be queer when her own sexuality is also at stake. Obviously, when she's binding her chest, that's a huge piece of her appearance. And so that becomes a big piece of what I'm writing about. But there have been books that I've written when I turned them into my editors and they've said, I don't know what your character looks like. And I said, well, why do you care? And they're like, because your reader wants to know what your character looks like. And I say, but I resist that. My reader should, I don't want to tell my reader what they look like. I want my reader to care about what they're like on the inside. And they're like, no, this won't sell. We need to give her some hair, right? We need to give her some clothes. We want to see her shoes. And so then I'm like, okay, so how do you, so to what extent do you do that? There's a writing teacher named Janet Burraway, and she talks about the ways that character is made manifest on the page and the way that people respond to character. And there are 4 methods. And so one is what the character does, right? The character's actions teach us who they are. What the character says is another piece. What the character thinks is another piece. And it's especially interesting when the thoughts are in contrast with the words that they actually say, when there's a tension between speech and thought. And appearance is the 4th way. And with my own students, I have them write a story, and then we'll go look at that story, and we'll say, okay, let's get 4 colors of markers here. Let's get crayons or highlighters or whatever, and let's look at what's your ratio. How are you asking your reader to understand your character? Are you using speech, thought, action, appearance? You know, what's your heaviest one? And then the next thing we do is we take away the heaviest one. So you're somebody who lets your character speak. Well, write me a story where nobody talks. Because we have to push against, right? But always in mind, it's the appearance that's missing. And that's something that's always missing in my first drafts. And then that's something that I always come back in because I know that that's something that the reader needs and expects. But with a case like Kenny's, it's not so hard because Kenny's physicality is so important to her story.
I was starting to want to ask you about the fact that you've alluded to the fact that all of your writing is in some ways a weave of some things that you take from your everyday world and then things that you make up. So as you said, all of your writing is personal, you know, on some level has some personal element. Do you think that there's any one of your books that's still more personal to you than any of the others in some way? Is that true of this one at all, or is that a bad question?
No, it's not a bad question at all. It's just that in some books I deal with literal issues that my family is going through.
Right.
And in some of my books I'm working more with metaphors. And not so consciously, but I'm working with concepts or institutions that I grew up with or that I live with that I need to interact with. So one of the things, I was talking to some students earlier, one of the things in my family, like in so many families, that we deal with in my family is drug abuse. And there are characters, not characters, there are people, my siblings, my cousins, that have bad, bad problems with drug addiction, and that keeps showing up in my stories. And I never write what really happened, because I don't want to even go there. Plus, I think that what really happened to a fiction writer can be a real hindrance, because if you already have the story in your mind, you don't make it as real on the page, right? And so for me, I will take something that's worrying me or something that I'm thinking about, and I will recast it. So the example that I gave somewhere I was talking today was Daphne's character in The Sweet In-Between. She has a corollary in my niece Lexi, who's 9 and doing great now, but is a kid that I have worried about all her life because I was so afraid that we were going to lose her, that at one time she had 2 addicted parents, now she has 1 addicted parent, and that somebody was going to come and get her and take her away, and that we wouldn't find her until she was 20 or maybe never, and that we would, so that there's that kind of threat there. Well, Daphne doesn't look like Lexi, and she doesn't live in the same house as Lexi, and any of that, but it's my love of Lexi that infuses my love of Daphne. And it's my care about Lexi that infuses my care about Daphne. And I think, and at times I actually put, I put Lexi talks, Lexi's a sass mouth, like Daphne, and I love it. Like she cusses every now and then and thinks we won't notice, or maybe wants us to. And so that shows up. But there are other times when I'm working more with things that are things that I see my students going through. They're not close to me in terms of something that I'm experiencing, but there's something that I've heard that has kept me up at night, or that I've woke up thinking about. And so you're at all different levels, or I am anyway in my writing, in terms of how autobiographical it is and how metaphorical it is.
You've used the statement that you would like your writing to stir things up a certain amount.
Yeah.
We've seen Rapture of Canaan where religious fundamentalism gets taken on, drug addiction, at least indirectly. As you said, it's not like you're, polemicizing in these books. It's not that they're not exactly issues based, but you have characters that are affected by these things. The same thing for like mislabeling someone based on their appearance, or some preconception about their gender identity or something like that. What's another issue out there that you keep thinking that even though you're not writing issues books, you'd like to do a piece about a character that's affected by? Is there another thing that like just bugs you for whatever reason, or you see something getting someone and you want to write?
I don't have an issue writing. I mean, I'm not so conscious of that when I'm writing, but there is something that I'm doing that's like I'm taking situations that piss me off, and I'm trying to recast them in a way that makes me understand something really different. I'll give you a quick example. This is a story that I've written. I wrote this story, my partner and I have a boat in the harbor in our little town. It's just a little fishing boat, and we love to go out fishing. And there was a man right across the dock from us who had a slip with a sailboat on it, and he let a guy who'd just gotten out of prison live on his boat. And we like to go down to our boat and hang out, right? We just want to go hang out on our boat sometimes, even if we're not going out. We want to be able to feel like we can go down to the boat, and if we want to just sort of sit out there and watch the sunset and be out there. And so then we have this man who's kind of sitting out there, and he's really not doing anything wrong, except that he's like sitting there looking at us. And I'm like, I don't like it. I don't like it. And it makes me really mad with the man across the dock who wasn't thinking. The man across the dock, the man with the boat across the dock was doing good for the world. He's trying to help a man out. He's given him 3 weeks to live on his boat while he gets his life together. And meanwhile, I'm not comfortable on my boat anymore. And so I wrote a story, I drafted a story that is from the perspective of the man who loaned out his boat, right? He really wants to do right. And in doing that, I actually found myself being much, much more compassionate toward this fella who I kind of wanted to just wring his neck. I mean, it's like, this is my summer. This is my boat. This guy is sitting here drinking, Milwaukee's Best and reading the Bible. No, I don't like it. And so anyway, so we worked that out, but part of my writing has become, how do I take something that's aggravating me and try to understand the genesis of it, and then make myself more a compassionate person. My aim in all my writing is I want to show, I guess I don't even know that I have an aim sometimes, and then I get a question that makes me go, okay, I know why I do it. One of the things I want to do is I want to take characters who've been disenfranchised, who've been looked over, who've been considered not worth having a voice, or considered that what they have to say doesn't mean anything, and I want to show them to be divine, even. Like, I want to show them to be whole, important people on the planet. And so with my drug-addicted characters, you know, I've done the drug thing twice in 2 different books that I know of so far. And in the first time, I was feeling very much compassionate toward the mother who's abandoned her children because she has a drug problem. And I thought, you know, nobody wakes up and decides to become a drug addict. You don't ask a second grader what they want to be when they grow up and they say, oh, I want to be a prostitute because I need my drugs. That doesn't happen. Something happens on the day before somebody makes that first bad decision. And I don't know where that is, but something has happened, and it's something that we need to understand rather than judge. Okay, so I'm like, I'm going to write this character who's coming out of a bad addiction, and I'm going to let her have done some terrible things, and yet I want to show her to be a worthwhile person on the planet with some good to do. Next book, okay, so I write that book. I send it to my cousin who's using, and she doesn't care. She doesn't read my book. She probably takes it to the pawn shop and gets 30 cents for it, and keeps on doing drugs, right? And I got mad, and then I'm like, oh, forget it, you old drug addicts. And then I got mad and I wrote between in between, and I'm like, I'm gonna let your daddy's kneeling on the carpet with snot dripping out of his nose holes, and he's the only one who doesn't know what a fool he is, right? For talking about how pretty his hubcaps are. And now he's in prison. And then I've got Constance, who's on the porch, and they're saying, oh, she's got the HIV, you know, she's contaminated, she can't even come in the house. Well, I'm angry there, right? Same family, trying to work through the same thing. So sometimes I'm less compassionate than others, but at my core, I really do believe that there are important things that can come from everybody, and I want to give them voices.
The question that I want to ask you is, because people seem to be wanting to make films out of stories like this. I mean, I know some people are really eager to see their novel made into a film, so they really push that and pursue it or something like that. Is that something you ever dabbled with, or you tinkered with the idea? Or you had a conversation with some people about doing one, or what?
About a movie?
Yeah, having a movie made out of a book like this. I would love to see this made.
Oh, that would be cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I've had some books optioned before for movies, and the funny thing about it, and so usually they fall away very soon. People will get some interest in it, and they will hold on to it, and then they will drop it. And so the one that was the option the longest for the movie was A Gracious Plenty. Okay. And in that one, they did a thing that was just unbelievable to me. That one is a story about a woman who was burned very badly as a child, and she works in a cemetery. She takes care of a cemetery, and she mediates between the dead and living worlds. It's a fun book because half of the characters are ghosts. So it was a really imaginative and fun book for me. But anyway, when they wrote the screenplay for the movie, they changed her gender because they said that nobody wanted to go to a movie to see a burned chick. But burn Leonardo DiCaprio and everybody would show up. And I mean, so I'm sort of like, but when you sell something, when you sell the right to it, you sell the right to it. Like, they get to decide what happens with it. So I haven't had a book made into a movie. I haven't gotten very far. It would be awesome to get rich maybe for a little while, but ultimately I write books, and I'm interested in books, and I don't really want to write screenplays. Sure. And I'm not, it would be cool to see it, but it would be especially cool if they filmed it like I liked it, and I don't think it would be so cool if they didn't. I wrote a novel called Orabelle's Wheelbarrow that ended up being, I rewrote it as a play, and it's been published as a play, and it's been produced as a play, and that was quite a learning experience for me and a great experience for me. But one of the things that it taught me is that I don't really want to be a playwright, because I didn't know this, and I'm not really proud to admit it, but I'm not a very good collaborator. And with plays, your characters talk back. Like, they'll just say, I don't like that line, I'm going to redo it. Or they will interpret you in a way that you didn't intend. Because with plays, all you really have is dialogue. And so the characters get to interpret that however they want. So that's kind of not my, I think that I'm more of a fiction writer, short story writer, maybe poet.
It's so richly descriptive.
Thank you.
It's
that you could film it.
Well,
right?
it's very cinematic in that way.
Yeah.
That it makes the movie in my head, which is
Yeah.
the best that you want.
Well, that's what I
right.
aim for. There was a great teacher, me or Liam.
Liam, put it to your mouth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
So there's this great teacher named John Gardner. He's been going a long time. He died in the early 80s, but he was a great fiction writer and he was known as a great teacher of writers. And John Gardner has this idea that in order for a reader to enjoy a book, that the writer has to create what he calls a vivid and continuous fictional dream in the reader's mind. And the two key parts are that it has to be vivid, so that you need to be able to see or smell or taste or touch or hear something in every single sentence. And it needs to be continuous in that there aren't any breaks, so that if you're moving in time or you're moving in place, that it's done with such finesse that the reader never jumps out and never stops dreaming. And so as a writer, I think about creating a dream in a reader's mind almost like a film. Like I would like to think that you could take a camera and you would know what to put on film. And you know, at the Clarkston campus today, some of the students had made book trailers for The Sweet In-Between, which are like movie trailers but for a book. And they showed them to me, and they were beautiful and they were so awesome, but they pulled out the images from the book. They pulled out different images, they chose different parts to dramatize, but they pulled out pieces from the book. And that's how people receive a story. And even though somebody can read a story and people read all kinds of different things, they're responding to something in it that is made palpable through the five senses. So that's one of the things that I've trained myself into doing, is to almost to be imagining somebody dreaming or filming the piece.
Wondering, one thing I noticed about you, it's cool that you were able to. Some writers are not. We were talking about getting criticized by our old creative writing professor. You must have had a thicker skin than I did, because you kept on writing. And at a certain point, I kind of took mine underground. But my question is, though, even though you have this capacity of kind of being objective about your work, I mean, all your novels, some people compare them like having kids. With your writing, are there certain ones that you love themselves? You love them more than the others?
This is going to sound so hokey,
do you
because
like your own writing, or
it's what you hear. It's what you hear other people say. I like them differently. They have different meanings for me. Like my first novel is called Bitterroot Landing, and it is so raw. It's the book I wrote when I didn't know how to write a book, and I didn't know what you weren't supposed to put in a book. So I said it all. So I've got like a character painting with menstrual blood. I've got people eating scabs. I'm like, well, yeah, that's what people do, right? And then I'm like, no, maybe not. But anyway, I had already published it. And it's a book that's so raw that I sometimes, like, I can't bear it. I can't even look at it again. And yet, I treasure it like you wouldn't believe, because it was the book that got my work into the world. My second novel was picked for Oprah Winfrey's book club, and it went to the #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And that was amazing, and it was so cool. And yet, I sort of got burned out on that novel, because I had to talk about it so much and I had so many people interested in it. And so that one, I'm appreciating it more later. I feel a little bit like I neglected it for a while. The third one, A Gracious Plenty, is my most creative. And it was at a time, I don't know why, but I'm like, why can't we have